Hello and welcome to this COMP3218 video on game design and development from the University of Southampton. My name is Tom Blount, I am one of the lecturers on the course and I am joined here today by...
Madeline Dwyer. I'm a PhD demonstrator on the course.
Excellent. So today we're going to be looking at some more of our students' courseworks. Madeline, could you tell us what we asked the students to do for this coursework?
So for this coursework, we asked them to make a small game prototype focusing on storytelling games based on one of 3 fables we provided.
Brilliant. Let's have a look at our first game. Alright, and our first game is the Lioness and the Shepherd, so no prizes for guessing which fable they base this one on. Nice title screen though, like cool low poly asset. Let's jump into it. We even got a level select screen, so already some idea that we've got some sort of branching story here, depending on whether we help or ignore the Lioness. Maybe gives the game away a little bit, but let's jump into level 1.
This is the story of a man named Bob.
Ooh, we got some voice acting.
Bob worked on a farm in the middle of nowhere. Bob's job was simple. He watched the sheep graze and harvested any grown plants. One day, a sheep had escaped from the pen overnight and stood, grazing outside Bob's house. In a rush, Bob went to get his sheep.
Okay, so Bob's sheep has escaped, Bob's rushing to get his sheep. It's not always nice when they remember the lessons they've learned from coursework 1 and they make sure to put a tutorial on the screen, although I've already forgotten what it said. WSD and mouse to look around. There goes the sheep. We've got to catch the sheep. Come back, sheep. Oh, that's kind of interesting. It speeds up when you get close to it. So, a nice little way of almost sort of managing players' agency there. I wonder what happens if I do just ignore it, though. Is it going to do anything to stop me? Yes, it is.
This is the story of a man named Bob.
You can't get away from
Bob worked on a farm in the middle of nowhere.
So we've got to watch the cutscene
Bob's
again.
job was simple. He watched the sheep graze and harvested any grown plants. One day, a sheep had escaped from the pen overnight and stood, grazing outside Bob's house. In a rush, Bob went to get his sheep.
So yeah, nice cutscene, but I would definitely put your checkpoint the other side of the cutscene. Hopefully, I won't mess up so badly this time, and I'll catch the sheep.
Yeah.
Alright, so we got.
I guess one thing which would be nice is if there was subtitles.
Yes, absolutely. So because of the way we're recording this, I can hear all of the lovely sounds, but Madeline can't. So you're slightly in the dark about who Bob is and what on earth he's doing. Oh no, that seems to be a lion covered in
While
arrows.
chasing his sheep, Bob encountered a wounded
In good
lioness.
shape.
He could not decide on whether he should help it or kill it.
So Bob cannot decide whether he wants to help it or kill it, but we win, so good. Okay. Oh, interesting. So we don't actually make that choice in gameplay. It's sort of entirely outside of the game that we make that choice.
Bob decided to
out the
help the
story a bit,
lioness.
doesn't it?
Yeah, go
He
back
needed
to
to
the main
collect
menu and
berries
make
for
the
the
choice.
lioness to eat.
Alright, so we're saving the lioness this time. Gotta get some blueberries, because lions only eat blueberries. Everyone knows this.
Their favourite food.
Yep. Okay, but some nice little UI and interaction stuff. As we get closer, it highlights and it gives us that exclamation mark. That's actually a really nice little bit of polish.
Yeah, it's good. There's nothing worse in a game when you're looking for something and you can't spot it easily.
I don't think there's a shortage of blueberries though, so I think I just hope we can find our way back afterwards. Maybe I should circle back around a little bit more. Okay, so gameplay wise, it's mostly sort of walking simulator type thing. You know, explore the environment and occasionally interact with something, which is fine. But they're not hugely using it to tell a story at the minute. What they've got right now is sort of here's a chunk of gameplay and then a cutscene telling you the rest of the story. They haven't quite woven those two together from the looks of it. And now I've got to find the lioness again in this quite large and quite samey environment. I think it was this way. Oh no, there's blueberries here, so it can't have been this way.
Yeah, I was looking at the rocks to see if that would help because it was near a rock, but then there's other rocks about as well, so that doesn't really help narrow it down.
I feel like it was on a hill. Maybe if we climb this hill, we can see. No, there's more unclaimed blueberries there. So I'm thinking. Oh, there it is over there. Oh, I went all that way for blueberries, and there was some right here. I should have just gone in a circle.
Bob fed the lioness the berries to help her heal. The lioness was eternally grateful for the help Bob provided.
Okay, we win. So back to the main menu, back to the title screen, and then onto the final Help Lioness level.
A few years later, Bob was arrested and thrown to the lions.
Oh no, Bob's been thrown to the lions.
He prepared himself to fight the lion.
We've got to prepare ourselves to fight the lion, but...
Bob recognized the lion.
Oh no, it's the same lion.
It was the one he saved the life of years ago. The lion also recognized him and refused to kill Bob. Seeing this, the king was in such shock that he let Bob go. The moral of the story is, a little kindness goes a long way.
Okay, so a little kindness goes a long way. Everyone lives happily ever after. So now let's do the
Bob was scared of the lioness and watched her struggle. Since he lost his sheep, he decided to collect some berries and walk home.
Okay, so we're ignoring the lioness, but we're a bit peckish, so we're just going to collect some blueberries anyway. So this feels like it absolutely could have been done within gameplay, right? We're doing exactly the same thing. It's just a case of, do we return to the lioness or do we return home? I feel like they could have incorporated that a lot more smoothly into their gameplay.
Yeah,
because then
rather than having to go back to the menu screen.
Yeah, exactly. You're making the choice within the game rather than having to go back to the title screen and out. So, yeah. Okay, while I'm wandering this forest collecting, apparently we've lost our sheep as well, even though we were right next to it. So while I'm instead collecting blueberries as a consolation prize, let's start going through some of the marks criteria. So we'll kick off with the quality aspect. Which is presentation and play. So presentation wise, what do you think?
I think it all looks quite appealing, like it's all quite matching styles, like the graphics. Obviously I can't really comment on the audio so much, but
so other than some AI generated text to speech, there's not a lot in the way of audio. Like, I do like the fact that the cutscenes are narrated, but a little bit of, ambient sound, like wind whistling through the trees or like footsteps or something like that would have been a little bit of extra polish. But the graphics, you're right, definitely are like really nicely put together. They're all very consistent. They're all used quite well. But we've already mentioned things like the some of the information highlighting for when you're near an interactable item. That's quite nice. So I feel like we're up to, I would say we're probably up to the good level here. So, sort of professional presentation. It's complete, it's effective. I think maybe they could have done more with the sound, which maybe stops it from hitting the excellent level. But other than that, I think it's pretty good.
Yeah, I think one thing with the information design is just the return home and the return to Lioness bit. Both, if you couldn't spot it straight away, it didn't seem like there's any indicators that you're going the wrong direction. So something like that might have been beneficial.
Yeah, that's true. Like, yeah, in fact, we did say like the graphics are quite nice, but they're all of the trees look the same, all of the rocks look the same. It is a bit difficult to navigate if you don't have a marker on a mini map or something like that to guide you.
Yeah.
Okay, so meaningful play. Oh, no,
a few years later, Bob was arrested and thrown to the lions. He prepared himself to fight the lion.
Can I? Yes, I can quit out. So meaningful play. I would say this is sort of, to me, it feels like it's at a satisfactory level. Like, it's playable. Like, it's definitely a thing that you can play, but it's not super engaging, right? They don't have a lot of mechanics at play here.
Yeah, it doesn't seem like there's much gameplay between like cutscenes. It's
Like, there's certainly no challenge to it. You're under no constraints. You've got all the time in the world
A
to
few
fulfill
years
your
later,
objectives.
Bob was arrested and thrown to the lions.
Technically, you can lose
He
the
prepared
first one.
himself to fight the lion.
And then,
Yeah.
this third level is really,
Bob recognized the
really
lion.
just a cutscene.
It was the one he ignored and didn't help years ago.
So it's not like you
The
have a
lion
chance to
also
fight the lion
recognized
either.
him and killed Bob immediately.
yeah.
The moral of the story is, a little kindness goes a long way.
So yeah, I think there's maybe more they could have done on this to make it more of a game rather than a vehicle for telling a story. So I think, but it is definitely playable. There are things that you can go around and collect. So I think it hits the satisfactory.
Yeah. Yeah, there's not
Bob
been any
decided to
news.
help the lioness. He needed to collect berries for the lioness
Just
to
to
eat.
get through this cutscene, and then I'm going to spend some time wandering around the forest. So that moves us on to the actual story aspect. So how well did it fulfill the brief? How does the story engine work? So we've split that into two parts. Let's look at how does the game world affect the story? What do the actions that we take in the game? What's the impact they have on the overall story? And here's the thing, I don't think there are any. There's explicitly no actions in the game world that affect the story. It's all done outside of the game world.
Yeah, it's all done in that menu.
Like, again, if it were a case of, do we take the berries to the lion or do we take the berries home, that would be a choice that we're making as part of playing the game. But they've deliberately put a separation there between the game world and the story choices, which is a bit of a shame, really. But yeah, there's nothing like, how fast we complete the... Part of it is because, again, there's not a huge amount of mechanics they've got to play with here. But if, for example, the more berries we got to the lion, the happier she was, or the faster we could get the berries, or something like that, or even, as I say, just do we deliver it to the lioness, or do we just go straight home? That would all be choices that we could be making within gameplay, but unfortunately there's not. I'm almost thinking we're at the absent level here, because there's nothing that we do in the game that affects the story.
Yeah, I think I'd agree. Because it's not like, yeah, like you say, it's not like anything is really about the way you play is changing the story. It all just comes down to what you click in that menu beforehand.
Yeah. Okay. So, on a similar note, is there anything that happens as the story progresses that changes the game world or the gameplay? And again, there's kind of not. So, if we take that sort of menu decision as, like, if they'd just thrown up a dialogue in the game, we'd call that, okay, this is a story decision. Again, it's not made through gameplay, but it's a clear sort of point of making a decision, but it's still not having a big impact on the gameplay. In fact, the second level, whether you choose to help or ignore the lioness, the gameplay is exactly the same. It's collect 16 blueberries and then go to a place. So there's slightly more impact than just. Well, yeah, it changes the sort of destination point you go to, so it technically does have a bit of an impact on the game, and obviously it does have an impact on the story itself, but that's not affecting the gameplay, it's affecting the overall outcome of the story. So it changes the final cutscene as well, depending on that choice you make. So it feels like that's probably like at a poor level, unfortunately, still.
Yeah, it doesn't feel like there's really much substantial happening, like story to game. I think the only difference is I think you do collect a different number of blueberries. I think it's 12 and 16, but that's not really anything substantial.
Okay, yeah, it's okay. So there is, you collect a different number of blueberries and you take them to a different point in the game world, but the game world doesn't change. The play doesn't change. Like none of, like. Part of the problem, again, is like the gameplay itself is quite sparse, so there's limited amounts of things they can change. So, for example, the final level, we approach the lioness in both scenarios, and then we immediately go to a cutscene, and the cutscene is different depending on the choice we've made, and that's an impact, but unfortunately, we don't see that within the game world itself.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think unfortunately that probably hits a poor. Okay.
Yeah, I'd agree.
So that takes us to agency. So how interesting are the choices that we're making? How many choices are we making? How do they manage those choices and things like that? Well, really, again, we've only got the one choice. And
yeah,
is it an interesting choice? I mean, there's no clear right answer. There's some notion of consequences. There's some idea of, well, we can go out of it. Actually, no, it's easier to help the lioness than it is to ignore the lioness because we have to collect fewer berries.
Yeah.
So that's maybe a bit of an oversight. Yeah, I feel there's probably a better way they could have done that choice, but that choice itself is probably an interesting choice. Do you go out of your way to help somebody that you could easily not do, and then, oh look, later on there's consequences as a result of that? That's a pretty standard video game choice. So the problem is there's only one of them, and again, it's not made in the gameplay. You have to go out to a separate menu to make it. But within the game, there's no choices you can do, other than choosing not to follow the sheep, in which case you just lose. So that doesn't count as a choice, I'm afraid.
Yeah, no, that's they're not following the sheep is essentially equivalent to just being bad at a level and losing.
Yeah, so a pass would be some choices, but only a few are interesting. A poor would be few choices, or the player agency is problematic. It feels like we might be between those two, so we really only do have the one choice. But if we look at it from all angles, it's a relatively interesting choice.
Yeah, I think. Yeah, I feel like I'd lean more towards the poor, but I can see where it'd be between them.
Okie doke. So that takes us on to the design elements. So how they've actually sort of conveyed that story. So starting off with pacing. How do you feel about the pacing of this game? So if we go back to the first.
This is the story of a man named
which
Bob.
means we sit through the cutscene again. Sorry
Bob worked on a farm in the middle of nowhere. Bob's job was simple. He watched the sheep graze and harvested any grown plants.
It is a very nicely designed
One day,
environment.
a sheep had escaped from the pen overnight and stood grazing outside Bob's house. In a rush, Bob went to get his sheep.
Pacing-wise, it doesn't really feel like there really is any pacing, I'd say. It seems quite flat. You follow the sheep and then you collect some blueberries. And it doesn't really feel like anything happens, I guess. It changes the pacing too much.
Weirdly, this bit with the sheep is almost the most exciting part of the game, because this is a part that you can fail. There are more consequences to this than collecting the blueberries. Now, that mechanically at least, and I've already said, we're working with a limited set of mechanics, unfortunately. Narratively, we go from chasing a sheep to coming face to face with a lion. That raises the dramatic stakes.
While chasing his sheep, Bob encountered a wounded lioness.
The lioness doesn't.
He could not
really
decide on whether he should help it or kill it.
We're not under any particular pressure. The fact that we have to keep going back to the menu between these things, I think, is the thing that really detracts from the pacing.
Yeah, it kind of interrupts the flow.
Yeah.
I think, like you mentioned earlier, in the bit where you're collecting the blueberries, if you have to collect them in a certain amount of time, something like that would add some urgency to it and improve the pacing a bit, I think.
Yeah, that would definitely make it give some degree of ascendant pacing. But where we are right now, so a poor would be no serious attempt at pacing, and a pass would be the pacing is unclear or flat. I don't think it's quite at the level of a poor.
Yeah, I'd say potentially between the two, because just where from the sheep bit being the fastest pacing, not fastest pacing, but the most tense part of the game, and that being at the start, I feel like that kind of knocks it down a bit from
I
the
think
past.
that's the thing. If we take a look at the final
A
level,
few years later,
so
Bob
the
was
cutscene
arrested and thrown to the
is
lions.
pretty dramatic.
He
We're
prepared
in
himself to
we're in a
fight the
Colosseum,
lion.
We're having to fight a lion. This should be, the climax, sort of narratively and mechanically of the
Bob
game.
recognized the lion.
But we just stand there,
It was the one he saved the
and then we
life
get
of
another
years ago.
cutscene. So
The lion also recognized
almost-
him and refused
yeah.
to kill Bob. Seeing this, the king was in such shock
I
that
almost
he
think
let
it might
Bob
actually
go.
be down at a paw, because
The moral of the story is a little
the
kindness
first
goes a
section
long
of
way.
gameplay is by far the most interesting. The climactic part is actually the most anticlimactic, and unfortunately, because there's those breaks between each of the story beats, it really derails the pacing. So I think it is actually unfortunately at a paw.
Yeah, I think I'd agree. I think
All right, what
I
about
don't really feel like there's pacing there.
techniques though? So I think they do a bit better on techniques. We have a number of different.
Bob decided to help the lioness.
Well, we've
He
got
needed
one,
to collect berries
one
for the
very clear
lioness to
technique that
eat.
they're using, right? We've got some cutscenes. We've got. What other techniques have we got? I was going to say, it might be a stretch to call, having the lion here with the arrows in sort of environmental storytelling. I guess the fact that we change location to the Colosseum, but I think that's a stretch. I think what we can say is they've got like very successful application of one storytelling technique, which is they've got a really good use of cutscenes.
Yeah. It feels like most of the story is through the cutscenes,
Yeah.
if not all.
I was going to say, yeah, probably all of it. So I think that puts the... So we don't have any dialogue or anything like that with other characters. We don't have sort of particular environmental changes as the way the story changes. We move location, but it's supposed to be like lots of years later, and Bob looks pretty much the same. And in fact, so does the lion, down to the arrows sticking out of them. So it doesn't really give a sense that time has passed, even though we're in a new environment. So... Yeah, I think they've got a fully successful use of one game rating technique, which puts them at the satisfactory for this.
Yeah, I think I'd agree.
Okay, and lastly, what about their feedback? So what feedback... so as part of this course, we give the students some feedback during the development process, and we ask them to interpret and act on that feedback. So what feedback did they get in their notes?
So in the notes, they've got feedback and response. For the first lab, I was criticised for having verbose prompts, making the gameplay tedious and sluggish. However, in the attempt to alleviate this issue, I decided to make the conscious effort to use as many icons as possible and symbols to denote the actions a player may take. However, this also proved to be counterintuitive since the symbols were misleading at times and had playtesters confused during gameplay. This game attempts to find a medium between the two ideas, resorting to symbols to help guide players towards their goals and having prompts to describe the actions the player may need to complete the game. And then you've got another issue my previous coursework had was the graphic models. While they did have a similar theme, did not appeal to some of the players since they had very basic level design and boring visuals. To counteract this, I intentionally densely packed the game world with models and vibrant colours to give off the feeling the player was in a real forest where they would struggle to traverse through. While the models all follow a similar low poly theme, the intentional steps were taken to further exaggerate this theme while making the game visually appealing. And then finally, they say the main issue that the coursework had was players found it difficult to operate the game and found the controls rather difficult to use. To counteract this, I have refined the controls for this game and created better camera and movement controls. I've also changed the way the user interacts with items to allow for a smoother and more intuitive playing experience.
Okay, so that's interesting because it sounds like a lot of the feedback they've gotten there is from sort of playtesters, and playtesters tend to give sort of more quality of life feedback. So things like, for example, the iconography and things like that, which, to be fair, we have already talked about as being, sort of a particular highlight of this. Their choice to make the forest like really densely packed like a real forest is interesting. I would say sort of partially successful because we've already complimented the fact that, yeah, it's a really pretty environment, but the fact that it's so densely packed and that a lot of the assets look quite similar makes it a lot harder to navigate when you've gone out looking for 16 blueberries. Knowing which way to go back to the Lioness is a bit tricky, so I don't know if it's necessarily helped there. Although, they've designed a nice sort of clear open space around the Lioness here, so they've made it a bit easier to manage that. But yeah, so most of the feedback they've gotten is sort of like around the graphical element of the game, not the design element, or at least they don't seem to have acted on that.
Yeah.
So I think overall, maybe sort of between a pass and a satisfactory for their sort of acting on the feedback. So some of the changes have definitely been successful. Some of them have been more successful than others, but it doesn't seem to have addressed some of the underlying issues with the game itself.
Yeah, it's a shame that they didn't have more like design feedback about this game. So yeah, I'd agree between like a pass and satisfactory.
Okay, so that takes us to the end of this game. Let's move on to the next one. Alright, and our next game is Swiftness of Justice. So, another nice title screen. Got some animations, got some sounds. Got a start button. Let's press the start button. Unit Fables, there's been an emergency call we want you to respond to. We can go back or we can advance. The caller was heard in conflict with an unidentified male. We're unable to determine the caller's identity. Dispatch to 6 Riches Street. Meet with Sergeant Marina Strong and Intelligence Officer Vanja Martinez. And of course we're Officer Aesop. Let's not have a repeat. Ooh! Intrigue, backstory, alluding to events that have already happened. Pushing to end negotiations as quickly as possible will only lead to more lives lost, so I'm already getting a sense for which fable they may have picked here. Yep, there we go. Bit on the nose, but...
Means it's definitely clear to us what's going on.
So we got some good sound effects. Oh, there we go. We've got a bunch of police officers just got out of the car. Clicking on any of the 3 police officers will show you which actions they can take. Vanja can research, Marina can investigate, and Aesop can check and affect the suspect's emotional state. Start by having Marina, on the right, investigate the front door. So again, incorporating like tutorial elements, even though we didn't explicitly ask for it, always a good move. So we can advance to the next room, investigate the front door. Aha, broken lock. The lock on the front door is broken, likely a sign of breaking and entering. On closer inspection, it seems like the bolt was shot off using a gun. So we know the suspect is probably armed. Okay, I was waiting for another step of the tutorial, but I guess not. Let's listen. There appears to be movement in the room in front of me. If you want me to safely investigate the next room, you should say something to make whoever's in there doubt themselves and retreat. Okay, so if we rush in while there's somebody there, consequences.
Yeah, I guess especially if they're armed.
So, usually, this type of scenario has, like, in a lot of, well, I was going to say in a lot of role-playing games, and a lot of simulation games, in a lot of games generally, I will always go slow and steady. I will always spend as much time as I can, preparing before going for that final encounter. And often games try and find a way of pushing you to go before you're ready, because otherwise it's maybe not as challenging. So it's interesting that this one has sort of flipped that and is trying to encourage you to take as long as possible. I'm curious what the trade-off is. So why wouldn't we just take things as slowly as possible? Is there going to be a consequence if we do that as well?
Yeah, maybe it's about finding the right balance of what speed to go at.
Property stream. 1,000 or so. 1,000 acres is a lot, right?
Yeah, that's quite a big plot.
Like, why? Like, for example, why can't I just sit out here and sort of iterate through every single dialogue option I've got before? This is real humanitarian type. Okay, and we can check back and look at our... Oh, so I can't. I've got to click all the way through, but I didn't add the notes about their family. Homer is a big weird co-founder. Insurance company. All right. No wonder he's got 1,000 acres then. So we could tell you to go in, but we've been strongly hinted that we should make them doubt themselves. So Aesop can psychoanalyze, he can negotiate, he can scare, he can pressure, he can threaten. So it looks like we've got two particular metrics that we're playing with, fear and doubt. Not hugely sure what each of those will do. I don't know why doubt would make somebody leave the room rather than fear.
Yeah.
Based on everything I've seen so far, I don't know anything. Good work, Ace. Let's try... So what was it? We want to make them doubt. So do we negotiate or do we pressure? Do we want lots of doubt or a little bit of doubt? Let's try negotiate. Drop your weapon and you're going to leave the house. Oh, he's appeared out here. There. Okay.
Oh. Not good.
Okay, and then we crashed the desktop because we didn't have a way of restarting the game, so let's give it 2 seconds. There we go. Okay.
You might need to reshare with me. Sorry.
Oh, yes, of course I'm going to have to do that. Let's try again. Share. There we go. Okay, so I'm pretty sure they said make the suspect doubt themselves so they back out and we can safely enter the room, right?
Yeah. Yeah, the way it kind of unfolded so quickly, I was starting to think maybe this was still the tutorial and then we'd go to like another level.
So we want to investigate the front door. Got the evidence. We want to listen to the next room. There appears to be movement. Do you want me to safely investigate the room? Make whoever's in there doubt themselves and retreat. That's what we did. Maybe we made too much fear. Maybe we just want a little bit of doubt and a little bit of fear. So let's do all the research. So that's the other problem with basing a game around slow and steady wins the race. Is we do have to go through all of these steps again. Okay, so yeah, we can't just make doubt. We can only make. And I feel like we did negotiate, right? Negotiate seems to be a safe option compared to pressure. So I feel like that shouldn't have given us an immediate game over. But let's try pressure. Come out and turn yourself in, or we're going to come to you. Okay. Okay. So. Too much doubt, bad. Just enough doubt, good.
Yeah.
Tell me more about him. Oh, hang on. Why is he showing up now? Is that the consequence for sitting out here and doing research? That he gets jittery and comes out?
Maybe. Yes, I think this bit must must be like after you've done a certain number of actions or something.
Okay, so while I'm going through this and restarting the game again, could you grab their game notes and we'll have a quick look at at their story path and why they and why that happens.
Okay, so
It's not necessarily a bad thing, but the some of the UI design, like some of the information design, it's really not clear what the suspect's state of mind is. Even if we ask Aesop to psychoanalyze, he doesn't say anything like, I don't know, like we're taking it as slow and steady as we can, as far as I can tell. And that's all the advice we've been given, so let's try again. Investigate front door. This is the next room.
there are 5 endings in the game, and the Jackrabbit ending, the one we've reached both times, is where either Marina confronts Declan prematurely, either by the player's choice, or by allowing Declan, the hostage taker, to become too confident, which leaves the player with an incomplete picture. They've also got a flowchart.
Okay, so if we sit and do nothing, he gets more confident, is what I'm getting from.
Yeah.
That's not
Yeah,
explained well in the game.
No, I think like they really emphasise the slow and steady, but maybe they should emphasise like the right pacing. I think that's what they're trying to get towards.
Like steady rather than slow.
Yeah.
So, hang on, if I psychoanalyze now. There we go, so now we're getting some information about this. It could be dangerous if he gets too confident. There we go, now we're getting some information about it.
Yeah.
It's still... He would also be very doubtful. If I ordered him to fall back now, he'll be forced to retreat. So I'm still not sure about the difference between doubt and fear. I assume doubt good, fear bad, but we don't want him to be too afraid, but we also don't want him to be too confident.
Yeah. It's a weird mix. I'm guessing confidence is almost like opposite to doubt, where we kind of want them to doubt that they should be doing the hostage taking.
So what's the difference between, like, if confidence is the opposite of doubt, what is the opposite of fear? Apprehensive. Okay. Or is fear really... Fear is the opposite of confidence. The more we fear them, the more they fear us, the more we can sit tight and investigate. But then we struggle to advance through the house because they're more set in their convictions. There's quite a few games that have this kind of, like manipulating a person's mental state or some other set of arbitrary metrics. And it's usually like a juggling act between, making sure that they don't fall too low or something like that. But usually they give you a lot more information to work on. And again, it's not necessarily a bad thing that they're not completely doing that here. In a way, it's kind of interesting because in real life, you don't have a bunch of meters telling you how afraid somebody is. You've just got to sort of work it out from context clues. But at the end of the day, a game is just a collection of systems, and it's difficult to know what the intention behind those systems is.
Yeah.
Alright, let's threaten some more.
Yeah, even if like the tutorial was a bit longer potentially, and they like explicitly said, "Oh, the more afraid they are, the more likely they'll do X," and kind of showed you how directly showed you how it all linked together, so that when you're in this moment doing the actual level, you don't have the meters per se, but you have more of an understanding of why you want to make them doubt themselves or why you want to make them fear.
Well, he's apparently still apprehensive and doubtful. So let's do another one. Now he's calm. Because I guess we sat tight and we're not pressuring him. He's also very doubtful. Okay, so... Ooh, we can investigate while we're here as well. So let's make him more afraid. Let's psychoanalyze him now. So now he's apprehensive. Okay. So now I'm curious about why don't we just make him afraid, investigate, afraid, investigate, afraid, investigate, and then we want to make forward, we just doubt.
Yeah.
So let's investigate the mantelpiece. We've got a wedding photo. The bride and groom probably live here. On the back, a handwritten note reads, "Congrats to the sweetest power couple I know. Don't let your marriage distract from work too much." What a lovely wedding gift. And then I'm going to psychoanalyze again. Okay, so we do actually effectively have like a... Ooh. He was apprehensive a second ago, so now we need to calm him down. Okay, so we want fear minus. So let's psychoanalyze now. There we go, back to apprehensive. So we'll investigate the TV stand. It is a TV. Okay, so I feel like that's probably a red herring, but still apprehensive. Check the bookcase. Macabre topics. Botanical poisons and 1940s medical journals.
Interesting library.
Yeah. Oh, okay, so investigating makes him terrified.
Right.
I don't know why. That throws. Now I'm doubting. So let's. Okay, let's go back. So you're going to investigate the stuff that I've got. See how he's doing in a minute. Apprehensive is good. So terrified bad, calm bad, apprehensive good. Just a weird way of phrasing it, Vanya. Okie doke, so we've got some colleagues. D is probably from the best man, which is Declan Lynn. Maybe that gives us some idea about the identity of the suspect, but first we're going to click the psychoanalyze button. Still apprehensive.
When you found out about the family, I think Declan was mentioned. Was it Declan's mum was somehow mentioned or something?
Okay, right. So Declan is home. So this is Homer's house. Declan's his lifelong friend and co-founder. 2 children, social media, work, numerous selfies at the shoot. Is that maybe our suspect? Okay, nothing more to investigate. Let's do another psychoanalyze. Apprehensive, good. So let's check. Okay, the room sounds clear. Push in. I like the way the house is sort of slowly revealed as we go. That's kind of nice.
Yeah, it's quite nice, like visuals.
Alright, still apprehensive and doubtful. Oh, maybe that's the thing. We don't want to make him too doubtful because if he gets to the final room before we do, like that's where the hostage is or something. I don't know. Listen to the next room. Okay, so we think he's in the room next to us. We've got nothing to investigate here. Do we want to investigate Ooh, so now I'm wondering, do we investigate everything, or do we only investigate the things that we think are relevant? I can't tell between fridge floor encounter which is the most relevant though, so let's try... Ooh, foie gras. Imported. Delicious. Research the foie gras. Perfect. It's just... apprehensive and doubtful. So yeah, I think rather than having to press the psychoanalyze button every time, just having like a meter at the top might be less realistic, but slightly more convenient. No, I don't think it will be, but I've been told slow and steady, so I'm going to be slow and steady. Yeah.
Doesn't sound very appealing.
Investigate counter. 6 meters of rope. So a person has been tied up as a hostage. Drop of blood. Not good. Recent injury. Check the psychoanalyzed state. Terrified. So we need to calm him back down. Calm. So, negotiate. It'd be nice if some of those voice lines changed, like given how much that we're going to use them.
Yeah.
There's movement, so now we need to make him doubt is the problem. Oh, which also reduces fear, so that's good. So listen. Okay, so now it's clear. Okay, so while I'm going through this, let's start taking a look at the the marks criteria. So presentation-wise, what do you think?
I think it looks quite visually appealing. Like, I think the graphics are all quite consistent, and I like the way the rooms are being revealed in the house. One thing I did notice during the tutorial bit, the text was like yellow on the blue, or at least that's what it looked like to me, and it was a bit of an odd contrast. But
yeah, a little bit trickier to read, but I think it was highlighting the fact that that was a tutorial talking to us rather than a person.
Yeah.
So some nice pictures, nice nameplates as well. Every time there's a dialogue, so we know exactly who's talking.
Yeah.
Apprehensive. So doubtful. So we've got time to investigate. Okay, so good would be professional level presentation, so complete and effective. To hit the excellent, it would also need to be appealing. I think it's almost there. I think some of the, the fact that it's like the default Unity font and things like that on like the case notes as well, like little bits of extra polish could be done, I think, but the in-game graphics themselves, the audio design is quite nice. Maybe could have done a little bit more with sound effects, like, when there's a dialogue, you get a little radio crackle or a hiss or something like that. But also, sort of when the car pulls up, there's a nice sound effect. When there's like a dramatic showdown, the music shifts gear. That's quite nice. We already talked a little bit about the information design. Like, it is there, but maybe it could be a bit clearer. So I'm thinking this is probably between a good and an excellent.
Yeah, I think I'd agree. One other thing regarding like the information design is sometimes they do capitalise the words that are obviously more important, like the apprehensive or terrified.
Yes,
so
that's true.
That's quite useful to know, like, obviously when you're reading a lot of text, knowing which bits are the key points. But yeah, I'd agree between a good and excellent.
Cool.
So then the next one is
meaningful play.
Sorry.
So I've been quite quiet while playing this, which is, usually a good sign. I've definitely been focused on playing it. It's certainly an engaging set of mechanics, sort of trying to balance these two meters. Like we already said, maybe a little let down by it took us a while to understand exactly how we were supposed to engage with that mechanic. But once we did, yeah, it's a nice little balancing act, and they're sort of drip feeding us like story elements as we go throughout the story. But we'll get to that in a moment. Yeah, otherwise, it's a pretty engaging game. It's almost getting towards the excellent side of things, so, we've got a decent amount of complexity in the mechanics, but ultimately we're just doing psychoanalyze, and then if apprehensive, continue, if calm, then scare, if terrified, then negotiate. So there's not a huge amount of complexity in the loop. Like, once we uncovered sort of how the system worked, maybe that's why they tried to obfuscate how the system worked exactly, and then sort of discovering it becomes part of the game.
Yeah, maybe.
But other than that, I think, yeah, definitely a very engaging game. I think this definitely hits the good level.
Yeah, I agree.
It's really difficult to talk and read all of this text at the same time. So next we've got story engine. So how does the game world affect the story as it progresses, and how does the story impact the game world? So let's take a look at their game notes and see what they say about those two things.
So the first bit they've got is, how does the narrative impact the game world? So they've written, first, as more narrative information is revealed, more options for research become available to Fania. There is a branching tree-like structure where both previous research and evidence found can lead to new options. For the evidence investigation, the position of Marina in the house roughly corresponds to how far through the narrative the player is. Her position in the house determines what options are available to the player in terms of which evidence can be found. As well as this, all narrative points that are mechanically relevant to the ending determination are placed in the case notes menu, where they can be displayed again should the player want to refresh themselves. And then for the how does the game world impact the narrative narrative. I read that bit now.
Let's stick with game world to story. So the choices in the game. Actually, no. I tell you what. Let's come back to that one because we've not quite reached the ending yet. So yeah, let's have a look at what are the story elements that are impacting the sort of game world and the way things play. This is sort of one of those tricky games to sort of separate these two concerns because the majority of the gameplay is sort of making these like sort of story decisions, or well, making them sort of like through an interface rather than through another type of interaction.
Yeah.
I really forgot whether there was somebody there or not. It's clear. Right, let's push in a little bit more. Oop. Dramatic sting.
So what they've written about how the game world impacts the narrative, they said the game world directly informs which parts of the fabula the player is shown, as the game centres around a hostage situation in which the police must investigate the house and research the characters' backgrounds. The in-game choices lead to different interpretations of the story and different conclusions being drawn by both the NPCs and by the player as to what the true narrative is. And then they've also got a couple of sentences which they said they didn't know where else to put this. They said, for the sake of highlighting the growing tension of the game, we've made the music adaptive to Marina's position in the house. This fully evolved track cannot be heard until the players made their way to the peak of the story's pacing.
Yeah, that's kind of nice. They like build up another layer to the audio track every time you sort of progress through the room, which, yeah, is really, really nice. Okay, so in terms of gameplay, like mechanical, like what have we got? Ooh. See, I'm trying to talk and read a story at the same time. It's always tricky marking these games.
Yeah.
So, gameplay mechanic is balancing those two meters, fear and doubt, and exploring and investigating the house for items. So I'm relatively confident in saying, you know, as part of the gameplay, if we explore all of the house, we get all of the evidence, we're going to unlock different sort of story endings. Definitely seems to be a big game world to story impact there. So if we look at the good, there's a number of examples where the game world impacts the story in important ways, and again in their game notes, one of the things they submit is a sort of diagram showing all of the paths through the story. So you say there's 5 different endings?
Let me just double check. Yeah, it was 5 endings.
Yeah, and presumably that's sort of basically, do we find none of the evidence, a fifth of the evidence, 2/5 of the evidence, and so on?
Let me just skim through. So one of the endings is the hair ending, where the player rushes into the house immediately. So so that would be like no evidence discovered. And then the jackrabbit, where we had like a little bit, which we've come to that ending. There's the lamb ending, which is if you mismanage the hostage taker and make them too afraid. The turtle ending, where you get to the final room of the house and confront the hostage taker there, but you don't have all the relevant information to the case.
Alright,
and then
I hope we've got
the tortoise.
So Homer has been swapping out this guy's medicine, swapping out this guy's Alzheimer's medicine for sugar pills. Again, weird phrasing, Daniel. Alright, that's maybe a bit of a jarring cut.
Yeah. He's gone back to the precinct for like a birthday party or something.
Yeah. Is this how cops celebrate a hostage situation going okay? Maybe, I don't know. Okey-doke, so... Unit Fables. Slow and steady won the race. Oh, and then we crash. Okay. Cool, so I'm glad we saw that all the way through to the ending. I will sort of mess around with seeing what other endings we might get. But yes, let's go back to... So, do we settle on a criteria for game world to story? I think we were saying definitely a number of examples where the game world impacts the story. I don't know if there's... It's interesting, because there's a number of sort of unique instances, but they're all sort of on the same theme, which is, do you collect all the evidence, do you not collect all the evidence, do you imbalance the meters, or do you keep them balanced? So I think we might be somewhere between a good and an excellent here again. So there's like a number of different examples, and there is some consistent interplay between the game world and the story. Because it's not just like obviously the biggest impact on the story is the ending you get, but because you're also being sort of drip fed story through dialogue based on the things you explore, that really sort of ties into it. I think the thing that would push them right up to an excellent would be if, for example, there was dialogue with the hostage taker, with Declan, throughout, and Declan's voice lines and things changed based on, you know, whether he was terrified or calm or whatever. That seems to be the big couple of metrics that you're spending most of the game balancing, and unfortunately you don't necessarily see that aspect reflected in the story.
Yeah.
So I think...
I feel like...
Yeah, game world to story is between a good and an excellent. What about story to game world? So this one,
I think how the story is like impacting the game.
Yeah, it's slightly less slightly less clear cut. It's not like there's a bit to a degree where if we find a piece of evidence, we can then ask I forgot her name, Vanya, to investigate it further. But there's not really something where knowing more of the story changes an element of the gameplay. I don't know, silly example. Something's revealed where we find out that Declan's deathly afraid of clowns. So now every time that we use the fear button or the scare button, we particularly mention clowns or something. I don't know, like something where there's a more direct link between sort of, as the story's revealed, having some sort of change to gameplay, or even, for example, we find out more about him and the sort of tolerance of those meters changes. So as we get sort of closer to the end and we know more about him, we either have more freedom in how we move those meters, or we have to be more careful about letting them drop too low or something like that. So remind me, in their notes, what do they say about story to game world specifically?
Story to game world. So they said, first, as more narrative information is revealed, more options for research become available to Vanya, which you've mentioned as well. There's a branching tree-like structure where both previous research and evidence found can lead to new options. The evidence investigation, the position of Marina in the house roughly corresponds to how far from the narrative the player is. The position in the house determines what options are available to the player in terms of which evidence can be found. As well as this, all narrative points that are mechanically relevant to the ending determination are placed in the case notes menu, where they can be displayed again should the player want to refresh themselves.
Yeah, all of those things sound very much game to story to me rather than the other way around. But, so I think story to game world, they might be more around sort of the level of a pass. So there are a few points where our progression through the story changes the options that we have in gameplay, but most of the interaction seems to go the other way.
Yeah, I think if they had like I think you mentioned more dialogue options between Aesop and Declan. You could then have the story, like the options can correspond to the story that you've like developed, like from the evidence and everything, and like you said about the clowns kind of thing, using that information.
Yeah, unlocking more options as part of the gameplay as you learn more about the story. Okay, so and similarly, in fact, so when we're talking about agency, the richness of choices, there's definitely a huge amount of options for us to pick. But I would probably go so far as to say there's a limited amount of choices. So, for example, we can effectively choose to ignore Aesop's psychoanalyst and just charge in, as I'm about to do. But a lot of these things boil down to calculations rather than choices, right? We ask Aesop what's their state, we pick the correct choice based on their state so that we can progress to the end of the game. Like an early game over like this isn't really a choice. It's something that we can do, but it's basically a you have failed. You don't get to see the end of the game, rather than it being necessarily an interesting and different epilogue.
Yeah.
Ooh. Interesting. So if we rush in, he catches Marina by surprise, but if we let him come out, Marina catches him by surprise. So that's the hair ending. If we just rush in, things go very bad indeed. So there's definitely branches. I would say that, the choices aren't super interesting though, unfortunately, because a lot of them boil down to calculations. And once you've made that calculation, you don't necessarily have the challenge or the impetus or the ticking clock to sort of say, well, I can just go through everything in his fridge and research it perfectly because I know that I can just make this calculation every time. So yeah, I think some of them are interesting, but I think that actually puts it sort of at the pass level. So some choices, but only a few of them are kind of interesting.
Yeah, I think again, like if the story was impacting the gameplay more and you had those like dialogue options or something like that, it would make it more interesting choices. But like you say, it's really you're just balancing the fear and doubt metrics, and like doesn't really like.
So again,
there's not really many choices.
Yeah, if there was some way of talking to the guy through the door or something, then that's something you could maybe do. Like like a choice, for example, would be a way of like, oh, we can make him really, really afraid and then play on those fears to try and push him away from the door. Or we can try and make him really, really doubtful and rely on that sort of like lack of conviction to push him away from that. Like that's sort of your choice of how do I want to approach this, not do I want to progress or do I want to fail.
Yeah.
Okay, pacing wise though, what do we think?
I think probably near the good level where like there's definitely, well, I don't know how much it is ascending pacing throughout, but it definitely has a peak near the end. But like throughout, I guess it kind of is reasonably flat and then it peaks.
So this is kind of the interesting thing. So just like I mentioned with the sort of like some of the problems around the choices not being as interesting as they could have been, mechanically I would say the pacing is a little bit flat, right? Once you go through the loop of check with Aesop, like negotiate or scare as necessary, investigate the room, check with Aesop, negotiate as necessary, get Vanya to research whatever it is you just found, repeat. Like mechanically, once you figure out that loop, the pacing's pretty flat. Dramatically and narratively, which is the thing that we're concerned about for this one, the pacing's pretty good. You've got a clear sense of pushing through the house. Every time, like at the start, you find a couple of like scraps of story that don't tell you much, but as you sort of piece it together and as you go through, you start building a clearer picture, and then you have the dramatic final showdown at the end, and then a little epilogue. Like narratively, they've done the pacing really well, and actually they've incorporated that with like the sound and the audio, as they mentioned, where things build up as you go through. So in that sense, they've actually done a really good job in pacing. So I think they probably solidly hit the good there.
Yeah.
Okay, storytelling
Yep.
techniques. So what have we got technique-wise? We've got the cutscene at the start. We've got the sort of cutscene epilogue at the end. We've got a number of different dialogues throughout. We've got sort of environmental storytelling in terms of things that aren't, directly relevant to the story, but the fact that this guy's got foie gras in his fridge means that he likes this, unethical and in a lot of places illegal delicacy that he's been specially importing and stuff like that. Helps characterize them and things like that. So I think they've got quite a range of techniques that they're using here, and they're using them quite well.
Yeah, I'd agree. I feel like it definitely builds up the characters a bit. Like you start to build up the idea of what this hostage is like.
So the other thing is, that puts them strongly at the good level, and then the top tier of the mark scheme is, have they incorporated the theme of the fable into their mechanics? And yeah, they absolutely have for this one. Like, their entire mechanic revolves around, slow and steady wins the race.
Yeah.
So that basically immediately puts them straight up at excellent. I'm almost considering if it hits the prizeworthy character. So multiple game writing techniques and the mechanics are key to that storytelling. I'm inclined to say yes, except for the fact that, as I mentioned earlier, sort of having the game just sort of game over early, because it takes away from it just a little bit. I think, other than that though, I think it's solidly between an excellent and a prizeworthy. Like, the mechanics absolutely support the theme. In a large part, they are key to it. But the fact that it sort of cuts off the story early if you fight against it is, I don't know. What do you think?
I think I get what you're saying. Yeah, I think it's almost like if they had like a bit of a tutorial that's a little bit like a tutorial hostage situation, even if it was like training type level. So then, rather than having that immediate game over, you get told off by your chief, and then when you start the level, if you had that immediate game over, at least you kind of knew that was coming, so you'd made that choice. And rather than having it just cut the story so early, because you don't get any of the story then. It's not like they tell you much about the situation. You just find out that either Marina dies or Declan dies.
Yeah, but other than that, I think solidly between an excellent and a prizeworthy there. So it's always nice to see that mechanics as metaphor angle. Okay, and last but by no means least is feedback. So what did they say about their feedback for this particular game?
So they mentioned a few bits. They said the first bit of feedback they had was make sure that the game isn't just a visual novel. And they said, I think we've addressed this well by giving the player a variety of options to select from, variables to manage, and game flavour beyond just the text boxes. Shall I read them all out, or do you want to go through them one at a time?
Yeah, let's go through them one at a time. So, yep, the fact that they've got those additional mechanics to sort of balance player progress, definitely better than it just being a cutscene. Better than it just being a visual novel. Again, nothing against visual novels, but it's not what we're looking for this coursework, so I think that served them well. What about the next point?
So the next bit they've said is have the players' decisions give feedback so they know what happened in the game world. So they said we specifically added dialogue that the NPCs say after the player makes a choice that inform the player what exactly they've done. So
do they? I'm not sure.
Yeah, I feel like the information's there, but I don't think it's immediately fed back to the player.
I was clicking the wrong button there. I was trying to make him more scared. Okay, so maybe that one we're not so sure about. What about the next point?
So the next one they said storytelling, less than 100 words of text between each game event or player choice, consider a cutscene. So then they said there is a cutscene, albeit a short one, at the beginning of the game when the police car drives up to the house. In addition, the player is never given too much text between places in which they can make a mechanical choice.
Okie doke. So yep, that's definitely even in sort of like visual novel style games, usually you want to sort of break up like big chunks of text and sort of separate things out a bit. And I think they do a good job of not making, like, despite the fact that it's mostly a text-based game, they don't have any big walls of text. I think that's a decent choice.
Yeah.
Cool. Do they have any other bits?
And the final one is red herrings in the research and clue finding. So they say there are several evidence items and research objectives that are red herrings. Though they do help with world building, they are not critical to the ending selection process. The way this is communicated to player is that they don't show up in the case notes menu.
Okay. So again, that sort of ties into what we were saying before about, environmental storytelling. They have some things that are unnecessary to the case but still build a larger picture. Yeah, I think that's quite good. It's it's interesting because it does sort of almost inherently slow you down by having to sort of pick through what you think is most worth investigating. I think maybe they could have done a bit more with that. So, like, I know the point is slow and steady wins the race, but you don't want to have to investigate everything in a living room in the middle of a hostage situation. So maybe they could have sort of had some hints that certain things were more relevant than others.
Yeah, I think one example was in the kitchen. Obviously, the foie gras kind of gave you an idea that the guy isn't the nicest person. But the counter, I think, had blood on it or something like that. So if it was, instead of just saying investigate counter, it could be investigate, like
stains on the floor.
Mess.
It was like investigate fridge, floor, or counter. And it's like, well, any of these could have evidence on it, so I'm going to have to go through all of these rather than knowing like what to spend my resources on effectively. But yeah, okay. So overall, I think they've made a decent attempt at addressing some of that feedback. For the most part, I think it's been successful. Some of them, like, more so than others. I think that puts them at a good.
Yeah, I'd agree. I think the main one that was like less successfully solved was the feedback to the players, but maybe having the meters that we talked about or something like that, rather than having to go back to ASOP every time and psychoanalyze, something like that would have helped. So then there was more immediate feedback to the player how they're affecting everything.
Yeah, absolutely. So okay, I think that brings us to the end of this game. Let's move right on to the next one. Okay, and our next game is Investigation Mystery. So no title screen for this one. We're thrown straight into quite a big wall of text. This one we also did have to get running in Unity itself, hence the bars at the top and bottom. So it's a crisp winter night in early 1900s London. We're a private eye detective, and there has been a murder. So naturally we do what any concerned citizen would do. We rush inside and immediately start interrogating people, from what I can tell. So we've got characters, we can interrogate them, we can find items, and then we can use those combinations of things to make accusations. Now I will say, this is a lot of instructions being dumped on us before we've even started the game. I'm not 100% sure how much of this I'm going to remember by the time we get into the game, but we've got WSAD or arrow keys, we've got the spacebar to interact with staircases, we've got mouse key to interact with characters and items. So let's give it a go. I should also say, some nice background music. We've got some lovely sort of smooth jazz playing in the background. Maybe not the most fitting thing for a murder, but, kind of mysterious. So we've got... Okay, we are Detective Triangle. We've got our selection of suspects here, I assume. Let's first go upstairs. Yeah, it is. So one of the things that I always say is I'm a proponent of very simple graphics. You can absolutely use geometric shapes for your characters and things like that, and you can definitely characterize geometric shapes quite well. However, I will say I'm immediately struck by a bit of inconsistency in some of the graphical styles here. We've got Detective Triangle. We seem to have like a sort of cute, cozy sort of pixel art sort of rooms, and then we've got sort of just a clip art knife and a torch, I think that is. So let's investigate this. Ooh, and yeah, some of the information design a little bit tricky as well. We've got white text on a white background, which isn't super ideal. But we found a speaking tube. A tube concealed between the maid and the chef's quarters in the master bedroom. Let's record that. Didn't seem to get any notification or confirmation that that was recorded, although I think there is something in the lower left there. Let's have a look at the knife. Okay, we found a knife. Looks incriminating, probably the murder weapon. And it turns out actually they were poisoned or something like that, and it's all a double bluff. Are you really trying to talk to a corpse? No, I'm trying to investigate the corpse. I am a detective. I will record that anyway. So this is the host's bedroom and it's host's corpse. So the victim doesn't have a name, they're just the host. Which is a little bit sad. Yeah, some more slightly jarring, different sprites. I mean, I guess it does, it makes it very obvious what things in the room are interactable, which is good. We've got some bank statements detailing the last 3 months of transactions from bank accounts owned by both Heather and Sylvia. We don't know who Heather and Sylvia are yet. This is maybe to do with, managing the player's agency. So, if it's important that we know who these characters are before we find this, then it's important to introduce the player to those characters, either by making us talk to them or making them somewhat more prominent in the scene. So we definitely saw some silhouettes of, I don't know, like Mr. Green and Mr. Blue, but I don't know who any of those are. So almost the Cluedo analogy, as you said, if they just named them Mr. Green and Mr. Blue, would have at least have some way of keeping track of that. Okay, so life insurance has been bought for Heather from the bank account of Sylvia. So is Heather the victim, or is that just somebody else that has life insurance? Because as far as we know, victim is just is just host. One thing that I will point out, I do like the way that the rooms highlight as you go into them. That's kind of a nice graphical touch. Like it sort of makes it really obvious, what room we're in, what we should be focusing on. That's pretty good. What have we got here? A set of 3 love letters found in the bin. They're addressed to my sweetheart Sylvia and signed from your admirer Agnes. More kisses than you care to count, so that's okay. So Agnes likes Sylvia. Sylvia may not like Agnes if they were found in the bin. I already feel like we need a corkboard for this. I don't think there is a way for us to check our notebook or our transcripts or anything like that if we're not in the middle of a conversation with somebody, so hopefully they'll crop up later. So we've got a ledger detailing finances for Sylvia's company. There are regular ongoing payments that seem unusual. Those outgoing payments. These payments match income payments on the bank statement. So Sylvia's embezzling. So I'm getting a sense that Sylvia's definitely guilty, which means in the grand tradition of murder mysteries, they probably didn't do it. Okay. Yeah, so we've got guest bedroom 2, we've got the study, guest bedroom 1. So I think that's everything on this floor. Yeah. Ooh, the child's room. That's interesting. In a way, sort of environmental storytelling. The fact that a child's room exists tells us something about, the world and the setting. It's not really decorated differently to any of the other rooms, so there's maybe more that could be done with it, but, the parlour is distinctly decorated from the bedrooms and so on, so that's kind of nice. We've got the library. I'm really hoping later we have to gather everyone in the library when we want to make our accusation. Okay, so we've got... Okay, nothing in the lounge either. Nothing in the library. It feels like we've got a lot of empty space in this house. Let's start talking to people. Let's start with Ms. Purple. So we can accuse them. Let's not do that. We could show them something, but I don't know who this person is yet. I feel like this was maybe supposed to be like a... Mugshot's not the right word, but like a profile picture of this person to give us a sense of what we're talking to. I guess name as well, so maybe a few things that aren't quite completed yet. Oh, that's quite small text. I found these while looking around. Care to explain? Did Heather know you were doing this? Was your love for the person who wrote these letters mutual? Did Heather know about the love? Okay, so we're given just a huge amount of dialogue options that are a bit meaningless to us because we haven't said anything to this person. This is generally not how conversations go, where somebody rushes into your house and then says, What were your opinions on the other people present today? Or was your love for the person who wrote these letters mutual? And it's like, who are you? You've just ran into my house after there's been a murder. What's going on? So I feel like some of these could, emerge a bit more organically. So I'm assuming, hang on, let me see if I can work this out. So was your love for the person, so this must be Sylvia, right? Is that, oh, so there is. That should be at the top. And the things that I found these while looking around, like, is that different to showing them something? Did Heather know you were doing this? Doing what? What is this? So stuff that we absolutely don't know yet. So I'm almost inclined to think that that's actually a bug and shouldn't have been revealed yet, or maybe they just need to take a bit of extra care in constructing some of these dialogue trees. Let's start with who are you? Oh my turn, darling. Oh my turn? Oh, right. Yeah, okay. So that's maybe a bit of a failure of the story engine that they're not taking note of the actions that we've taken yet. So that's Heather's wife, Sylvia. Presumably Heather must be the dead person. We've been married 25 years, hence the party I co-hosted. Truly a drag that such a wonderful night has been ruined. That seems pretty blasé for somebody whose wife of 25 years has just been murdered. Sure, what a drag. Heather can't be the one that's dead, right? If that's how this... Either they're incredibly guilty, or they hate each other, or it's not Heather that's dead. Do you know roughly what time she left? Oh, maybe Heather left? What were your feelings towards Heather? There we go. Just Andy. Okay. Oh, can I record some of these things as well? Is there anything else you want to tell me? I noticed that Heather's diamond necklace she was wearing was missing. Okay. Is there any reason for me not to just hit record on everything I see or talk about? Speaking tube, knife, host's corpse. Default show. Okay, so some of this isn't quite working. Default show. Default show. Okay, so none of those are quite working. Well, yeah, so we've got some talk option. So maybe these are only unlocked if we've already found the love letters. But there are definitely some things that seem to be unlocked too early. Where were you at the time of the murder? Like, the time of the murder was 2 seconds ago, right? We've just burst in. I was in the parlour with the rest of the guests. I retired to the study early. 3 months of silly letters. Did Heather know you were doing this? The party? So, how do you explain this? Well, I got a kick out of doing it, so I had to keep going. What does that mean? What? Oh, hang on. I tell you what, I'll do that again, and then record. There we go. And then in the bottom right, the bottom left, I get a console.log that says embezzlement reason added to notebook. So that's what we were showing her. So we've just said, you're embezzling. And she's like, yeah, it was great fun. I love embezzling. Okay. You know what I was saying before? It's like, this person is clearly guilty. It's obviously not them. I'm getting a strong suspicion that it might actually... Okay, let's talk to somebody else. So, who are you? We've got Bartholomew. Met every guest at the door. People gathered here were the only people on the premises. Okay, good. You're much more straightforward, Bartholomew. You're the family butler, previously chef. Okay, so you liked Heather. Again, my Poirot brain is going, you liked the victim. It must have been you! Where were you at the time? You were on guard between the entrance and the parlour. Is there anything you want to tell me? Sense no ill will from all the members of the household. Shocking and horrifying. Interesting. Can I show you the knife? Default show. Can I show you the tube? Nope. Okay. Let's talk to Green. Who are you? This is Agnes. Agnes is Bernard's assistant. Agnes is in love with Sylvia. I'm probably Agnes then? I've never been in this house before because you weren't allowed. I'm going to come back to you. So that must mean you're Bernard? You're co-owner of a business with Heather, entrepreneur, best and only success. Okay, maybe there's motive there. Keep record. Okay, it feels like I don't know why I have to click record after each of these. It feels like that should probably happen automatically. We met around 10 years ago in a bar in the city. You'd just declared bankruptcy. Okay, nice bit of backstory. Where were you at the time of the murder? Is there anything you want to tell me? Sylvia and Heather must have been doing better than me. Not sure how they make their income go further than I do for my family. Clever investments and massive amounts of embezzlement. Speaking of which, do you want to have a look at this? No, I can't actually show you stuff from the ledger. See, ooh. I can click and drag though, that's kind of nice. So I guess the showing is the items are mostly for the accusations. That's the point actually, there is an entire other floor of the house. I'll come back to, I've already forgotten their name, Mrs. Green. Agnes, there we go. Okay, so we've got a newspaper. Oh goodness. Multiple torn out scraps from several newspapers. All of them have one theme, embezzlement, specifically embezzlement from Sylvia's company. She's even quoted in one mentioning how she feels betrayed by a trusted friend. One scrap has details blotted out in black ink. Okay. But she just freely admitted to us that she was doing all of the embezzling. The maid. Low detail rendering picturing the young maid with a similar age man and two elderly people. There is a tear in the bottom left corner. Ooh, now we're getting like to the Poirot-y stuff. This was concealed behind a dresser in the maid's room and has been moved from its hiding spot frequently. One of the figures in the photo can be recognized in the newspaper. Okay. So that's interesting. So presumably that text only shows up because we've already seen the newspaper. Concealed speaking tube found. Okay, so we've already found the other end of that, but let's record it again. Have we got anything in the butler's quarters? No. Have we got anything in here? Ooh, we've got more people in here. Knives in there. So presumably that's the chef and the maid. Talk. Who are you? You're Margaret the maid. Responsible for the upkeep of the house. Can I show you maid family photo? Default show. Talk. It doesn't seem to have unlocked any new dialogue options. So let's record that. Where were you? Record that. Is there anything you want to tell me? You acquired notice of dismissal. That seems to have... I don't know, that the text seemed a little bit broken there. Let's talk to, presumably your chef? I'm chef. No real opinion, they pay me, I work for them, I live another day. Sure. Gotta get on that grind. Where do you think? I'm the chef. Oh no, I haven't been recording all of these things. Hang on, let me start again. Record. 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 And is there anything you want to tell me? Barty the butler may have been at his limit. He seemed uptight and stressed. Well, okay. Can I show you this? That doesn't seem to have done anything. Okay, so I think we've seen everything in the house now, apart from talking to Agnes. So let's. Oops. We don't have anything. So if we show Agnes the love letters, hey, there we go. We got an effect from showing somebody something. And that's unlocked some new dialogue options. Okay, that's good. They're very secret. I don't think she knew. I want to point fingers, but I think the staff in the house are very shifty. Aren't you the staff in the house if you're Bernard's assistant? Oh, Bernard's. Who am I? I'm thinking of Bartholomew. I would make a terrible detective. It's definitely up to something I can tell you what. Okay. Okay. Yeah, although, you know, maybe that would make it too easy. You've got to have some red herrings, but a better message than default show would be good. You know, even if it was just something like, I don't know why you're showing me that. You know, the typical kind of adventure game response. Oh, right, you think that the testimonial might have changed things. Oh, there we go. The chef thinks you may have resented the amount of work you had to do. How dare he? How dare you undermine the work I do in my relation? I will be having some stern words. Okay, so I feel that... Oh, goodness. Why were you fired? Oh, she's the one. Okay, yes, we know you're in... Yeah. What was Heather's reaction to you? She didn't know she was fired. She never mentioned it, and obviously neither did I. Okay. Yeah, for embezzling hilarious amounts of money. So the maid photo is like super important, but I have no idea why. Maybe the newspaper? Oh, there we go. See, there's your sort of like, oh, I don't know why you're showing me this. So maybe we do have to go through all. What if we showed the chef the knife? He's standing next to a lot of knives. Ah, there we go. It's one of his. J'accuse. No dismissal. Ledger. Wait, hang on. If we show Bernard the embezzling. Here, take a look at these bank statements. Alright, what I think I'm going to do is start blindly throwing around accusations, and then we'll take a look at their game notes and see if they have the solution there for us. So let's throw around. Let's accuse you. Nope. Oh goodness. Alright, if I end accusation, can I actually talk to you again? No, because I've wasted one of my accusations even though I didn't actually finish it. Okay, let's accuse you. Inventory. The lovely. Ooh, what's that? Yes. Okay. And accuse. Okay, that doesn't seem to have done anything. Let's try accusing you. Okay. I think I'm stuck. Okay, so the accusation system looks like it may not be working particularly well. Let's start going through the marks criteria while I try and figure that out. So presentation-wise, we've already talked a little bit about the graphics and some of the information design. Like overall, it's not terrible. We've got a sense of, you know, who we are, where we're going, and what we can interact with. But there's definitely, you know, a lot of room for like extra polish and tying together some of these assets a bit nicer. So I would say that we're probably at the level of, you know, workable, which would put it at a satisfactory category. That is true, actually. So that could push it down to sort of like flawed or the pass level, because yeah, a lot of the elements are inconsistent and some of the information design is a bit problematic. some of the information that we're being given from the objects, for example, is also a little bit tricky to parse as well. Okay, so yeah, I don't think it's necessarily lower than a pass though. Meaningful play. What mechanics have we got? Well, it's sort of standard detective mystery game mechanics. We can collect evidence. We can try and interview people. In theory, no, in practice, as we find more evidence, we unlock new dialogue options, and then we've got some way of trying to accuse people at the end. So I would say it's certainly playable. It's like definitely there's definitely enough of a game here that we're making decisions, we're exploring, we're searching for things, we're trying to piece it together. I think there may be a few sort of like some bugs and some sort of design choices that are sort of hampering it a little bit. So, for example, the plethora of dialogue options we got when we first spoke to Sylvia, despite having never been introduced to that character before, was pretty overwhelming and made sort of some of those decisions a bit trickier. But other than that, there also doesn't necessarily seem to be an end state. So let's accuse you with something from my notebook this time instead. So I can't accuse, can I? Okay. So yeah, that probably puts it as... So overall, I think their collection of mechanics would sort of put them at the good level, but some of these like bugs and some of the design decisions I think would drag it down to a pass, which makes me think that we effectively split the difference and it gets sort of approximately a satisfactory. Although, yeah, it's tricky because I'm not sure how much of this is just me making bad accusations and how much the accusation system is a little bit... I don't think it's a critical bug. I think I'm just sort of struggling to use it a bit, and as a result, I'm not progressing. So I don't think it drags it down further than that. So I think it keeps it as, the satisfactory level. Story engine-wise, how are the things within the game world affecting the story? Well, as we discover new bits of evidence, we unlock new dialogue choices. So that's quite a common way of doing it in these types of games, and quite a nice way of doing it. So we've got some examples of where the game world impacts the story. Presumably, if we could make our way through an accusation and get to the ending, we would get a different ending based on who we accused or how well we accused them as well. So this will be useful, but I need to present another piece of evidence. But how do I do both? I think it may actually be more bugged than I thought, because it looks like... So I'm getting the sense that it is definitely the maid, because that's the first time it said, oh, this is a useful piece of evidence. But I don't know how I select both those things at once. Aha! Okay, good. I think. Progress? Okay, there we go. It's just a misunderstanding. You can see that by itself doesn't really prove anything. I think we're on the right lines. That would put game world to story at a sort of satisfactory. There are some things that we can do within the game that sort of change the overall dialogue options that we've got, and sort of presumably again the outcome of the story. Story to game world. Are there any examples where the gameplay or the world particularly changes based on the story progressing? It doesn't feel like it. The game world feels pretty static. The NPCs don't necessarily move around. They don't, nothing in the rooms sort of changes over time as you sort of progress through the story in that sense. So that would put it at maybe somewhere between a poor and a pass. There is definitely support for that to happen, but they don't seem to be making the best use of it. like if you buttered somebody up by pretending to believe them, then they give you a key which lets you unlock a new thing, so you get to continue exploring as part of the game world kind of a thing, and you can find that crucial bit of evidence or something like that. Whereas the gameplay doesn't really change and adapt as the story progresses. The story certainly changes and adapts as we go through the game, but not necessarily as much the other way around. Yeah, I think sort of at a poor level, maybe between a poor and a pass for that aspect of it. So yeah, a better use of game world to story than story to game world, which is okay. That's how it goes sometimes. So in terms of agency, what about choices and branching? Well, our main choice is who we believe and who we accuse and things like that. It doesn't necessarily have a big impact on the moment-to-moment gameplay, as we've said, but they are interesting choices, and detective games are sort of a natural fit for having some of these things where we have to consider the evidence and decide what we think it means and interpret it and try and piece it together, and therefore that choice is not inherently interesting, they've had to work to make it interesting. So I think they've done pretty well from that side of things. Where they struggle again is sort of partly with managing the player's agency. So the fact that before we've even spoken to their names are already merging together in my head. Before we've even spoken to anyone, if we found enough evidence, we can just burst right up to Sylvia and say, "Tell me about this." So I think, again, it hits sort of satisfactory in terms of, yeah, they definitely have choices. We can choose to accuse different people. We can choose the ways in which we accuse them based on our own conclusions of the evidence we found exploring through gameplay. And I think that's well done. But I think the management of the agency is lets it down a little bit. So I think probably it hits a satisfactory there. And on a similar note then, pacing. The pacing, again, doesn't feel like there's... as we were sort of, it's natural that we're going to compare this to Poirot or Miss Marple or any of those sort of Agatha Christie series. There's, usually some amount of setup where everyone's introduced. There's the dramatic incident where somebody is murdered. The investigation builds and builds and builds, and then somebody says, if I can have you all in the parlour, and then there's a big sort of speech and the accusations are made. In this, the murder's already happened when we arrive. We just kind of burst in, we don't know anyone, and then we mostly sort of look around the house for evidence and sort of talk. The pacing is... other than the accusation at the end, which I guess is sort of the natural peak, it doesn't ascend to that peak. It's sort of quite flat, and then there's climax. So that sort of puts it at the pass level, really. So the pacing is a bit unclear or a little bit flat. And again, I think that's partly, like you said earlier, like down to the way they've managed some of the agency and the freedom you've got to sort of look around, and part of the way that they've just sort of framed the story. Okay, in terms of the techniques they've used to tell the story, what do we have? So we have a big wall of text right at the start to set the scene, which I will say is not a particularly good use of the medium. However, through exploration, we find different sort of pieces of evidence, like little bits of environmental storytelling. We can explore the house and see that, yes, there's a maid's room and a large kitchen and a parlour. This is probably the house of a wealthy person. We find little bits of evidence that tell little bits of a story. And of course, we have the dialogue and the interrogation and the different reactions between the people. And that fleshes things out much, much more than the big wall of text at the start does. Oh, and I can't continue interrogating the maid because I ended the accusation. Okay, so a satisfactory would be fully successful use of at least one game writing technique. I think they go beyond that for this. I think they probably hit a good. They've successfully used more than one game writing technique. I don't know if they get all the way to excellent, because I don't know what the theme of this story is necessarily supposed to be, and I don't know how the mechanics particularly help to convey that. So do they mention in their game notes which of the fables they're basing this on? I would maybe assume that it's a, tortoise in the hare, slow and steady, gather all the evidence, build the case kind of a thing. but it's not super apparent from the mechanics that we're able to use within the game. Okay, so yeah, so I think that holds them back from hitting the excellent as far as the criteria go, but I think they do hit good because they've used a number of different techniques. Slightly detracted by that wall of text sort of to set the scene. They maybe could have done that in a little bit more interesting way. But throughout the game itself, the story is like drip fed to us in interesting ways through a number of different techniques, so I think they at least hit a good for that. And lastly but not leastly is feedback, although looking at their notes they haven't actually talked about any of the feedback they received or how they've acted on any of it. So unfortunately that just has to be an absent. Okay, in which case that brings us to the end of this game and the end of this batch. So thank you very much for watching, and we will see you very soon for another video.